My husband kept addressing me by my younger sister's name. I began calling him by my ex's name. Can you imagine the man you built a life with, the one you promised forever to, suddenly wanting someone else? Someone incredibly, uncomfortably close to you? What if your husband started calling you by your sister's name, not just once, but dozens of times, even in your own bed? It felt like a cruel, twisted joke, until it became something far, far darker. Daniel and I had been married for 7 years. 7 years. We had a life. Then my younger sister, Allison, needed a place to stay after her divorce. Of course, I invited her. She needed support, a soft landing, just for a few weeks until she found her own apartment. And Daniel, well, Daniel was weirdly excited. He cleaned the guest room himself, bought new sheets, even put flowers in there. At the time I thought, oh, how thoughtful of him. Looking back now, the signs were blaring. They were so obvious. That very first night Allison stayed over, we were eating dinner. Daniel passed me the salt and said, "Here you go, Allison." I laughed it off. People mix up names, right? But then, 5 minutes later, he did it again. He asked Allison if I wanted more wine while looking straight at me. Allison noticed. She gave me this uncomfortable, knowing look. Later, after she'd gone to bed, I asked Daniel about it. He just brushed it off, said our names were similar, that I was overreacting. My name is Rebecca. Nothing like Allison. The next morning, it continued. Daniel made breakfast, and without thinking, he set Allison's plate in my spot. When I sat down, he goes, "Oh, that's for Allison." She wasn't even awake yet. When she finally came down, he served her first. He remembered exactly how she liked her eggs from one conversation. But after 7 years of marriage, he still forgot I don't eat bacon. He called me Allison 3 more times before noon. It just kept getting worse. Once Allison started her new job, Daniel would ask me, "How was Allison's day?" when I came home from work. Not, "How was your day?" but Allison's. He'd text me questions meant for her, or ask me to pick up her specific shampoo brand from the store. When I said, "That's not my shampoo," he looked genuinely confused. He paused, then said, "Sorry, Allison, I mean Rebecca." My own name. It sounded foreign coming from his mouth, like he had to actively remember it. At our friend's barbecue, he introduced me to his co-worker as Allison. The guy shook my hand, saying, "Nice to meet you, Allison." I corrected him. And Daniel. He laughed. He said, "He gets us mixed up because we're sisters. But we look nothing alike. I have brown hair, she's blonde. I'm 5 feet 8 inches, she's 5 feet 2 inches. The co-worker just looked baffled, but went with it. Daniel called me Allison 4 more times at that party. People started noticing. Our friend Jake even pulled me aside, asking if everything was okay. 2 weeks into Allison living with us, Daniel started comparing us. Constantly. He'd say, "Allison made coffee better. Allison folded towels properly. Allison knew how to dress for her body type." But he'd say all this to me, calling me Allison, while criticizing Rebecca. It was like he'd completely forgotten which sister was which, or just didn't care. During movie night, he sat between us on the couch. Halfway through, he put his arm around me and whispered, "You smell nice, Allison." I pushed him away. Hard. Allison heard everything. After that, she started looking for apartments even faster. Daniel seemed panicked about her leaving. He actually told me, calling me Allison again, that I should convince my sister to stay longer. I just stared at him. "I am your wife, Daniel, not Allison." He mumbled, "Right, sorry, Rebecca." But 5 seconds later, he called me Allison again. The absolute worst? It was during intimacy. One night, Daniel was kissing me and he whispered Allison's name. I pushed him off me immediately. A cold wave of shock and disgust washed over me. He tried to claim he was thinking about work. Work. What work involves my sister's name? He then accused me of being paranoid, of creating problems. It was gaslighting, plain and simple. The next morning, he made breakfast and cheerily said, "Morning, beautiful," to Allison. Then he looked at me and just said, "Morning." Just morning. That day, I found Daniel's phone open on his lunch break. Not snooping, just seeing. His recent searches were all Allison's social media, her old modeling photos from college, even her ex-husband's LinkedIn. He'd saved 17 photos of her to his phone, some from before she even moved in. Pictures from my own wedding, where he'd cropped me out and kept just her. And then the final straw, our anniversary dinner reservation. He'd written Daniel and Allison, then crossed out Allison and wrote Rebecca. The restaurant host had actually asked if Allison was coming. Daniel had said maybe next time. I lost it. A cold, calculated fury settled in my stomach. I started calling him by my ex-boyfriend Roger's name. Every single sentence. Roger, can you pass the remote? Thanks for dinner, Roger. Roger, your mother called. Daniel got annoyed immediately. You're being childish, he snapped. I just blinked innocently. Oh, I'm sorry, darling. I'm just confused. Your names are so similar. Daniel and Roger. Nothing alike, of course, but apparently that didn't matter. At his company dinner, I introduced him as Roger to his boss. This is my husband, Roger. Oh, sorry, I mean Daniel. I always mix them up. His boss looked concerned. Daniel's face went crimson. I called him Roger 12 times that night. I even told the CEO's wife that Roger was so dedicated to the company. She looked at me, perplexed. Who is Roger? I batted my eyelashes. Oh, silly me. I meant Daniel. Roger's just this guy I used to know. Daniel finally pulled me aside, absolutely seething. He hissed. You're embarrassing me on purpose. I just smiled. Now you know how it feels. The next week, I escalated. I kept it up for 3 days straight. Every morning at breakfast. Roger, can you pass the coffee? He'd set the mug down hard, jaw tight, but handed it over without a word. At dinner, I thanked Roger for doing the dishes. Roger this, Roger that. His mother called Tuesday evening, and I answered cheerfully, telling her Roger would call her back later. Daniel ripped the phone from my hand, stormed into the bedroom, slamming the door. I heard him explaining something to her in a low, furious voice. When he came out, his face was beet red, and he wouldn't even look at me. Thursday morning, our neighbor stopped us in the driveway. She wanted to ask about borrowing our hedge trimmer. I smiled, bright as day, and introduced my husband, Roger. The neighbor looked utterly confused, glancing from me to Daniel, then back again. Daniel's face went from red to purple. He corrected me through gritted teeth. My name is Daniel. It always has been. I laughed. Oh, I always mix those names up. They sound so similar. The neighbor, bless her heart, just took her hedge trimmer and practically ran. Daniel waited until she was safely inside her house before he exploded. He said I was manipulative and cruel, that I was embarrassing him on purpose, that this whole thing was toxic and needed to stop. I leaned against the car, pulled out my phone, and opened my notes app. I scrolled through the list I'd been keeping. 43 times in 3 weeks, I announced, my voice steady. Then I started reading them out loud. Date, time, context. Every single instance he'd called me Allison. At breakfast, during dinner, in bed, at the barbecue, at his company event. The neighbor stopped talking. Daniel's mouth opened, but nothing came out. That afternoon, Allison found me in the kitchen making coffee. She closed the door, leaned against it. Rebecca, she started, her voice small. I feel terrible about all this. I never wanted to cause problems in your marriage. Maybe I should have just stayed in a hotel. I turned to her, my heart aching. Allison, this isn't your fault. Daniel made his choices. You've done nothing wrong. But I had noticed. She'd been apartment hunting every night on her laptop instead of watching TV with us. She started eating breakfast before Daniel woke up, avoided being in the same room alone with him. When he offered to help her with something, she'd make excuses or wait until I was there too. She already had 3 apartment viewings scheduled for the weekend. Marshall called Friday evening while Daniel was at the gym. He'd heard about the company dinner from mutual friends. People are talking, Rebecca, he said, his voice serious. Daniel's boss had apparently asked someone if everything was okay at home. Marshall said Daniel's behavior at the barbecue, the way he kept calling you Allison, the way he looked at your sister, had made everyone uncomfortable. He told me he was glad I was standing up for myself, even if my method was unconventional. We talked for 20 minutes. He even offered to come over if I needed someone to talk to. I told him I was okay, but I appreciated it. When Daniel got home, he asked who I'd been talking to. Marshall, I said, watching his face. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed. He asked what we talked about. The barbecue, I answered simply. He went to take a shower without another word. I started documenting everything in a real notebook instead of just my phone. A small journal from the drugstore. Every time Daniel called me Allison, I wrote it down. Date, time, exact context, who else was present. Tuesday morning at 7:15, during breakfast, while Allison was still asleep. Thursday at 6:30 while we were watching the news. Saturday afternoon at 2 when we were doing yard work. The list grew. By the end of week 4, I had 37 documented incidents. I counted them, did the math. The pattern wasn't getting better, it was getting worse. Week 1 had 7 incidents. Week 2 had 9. Week 3 had 11. Week 4 had 10 so far, and it was only Saturday. Sunday evening, Daniel came home with flowers. He set them on the kitchen counter, looking genuinely contrite. He said he was sorry, that he'd try harder to get my name right, that he knew it was bothering me, that he didn't mean to hurt me. I put the flowers in a vase. We made dinner together, sat down to watch a movie. Halfway through, he asked if Allison wanted more popcorn. I was holding the bowl. He was looking right at me. I pointed it out. He stammered, said he meant to ask if I thought Allison would want some when she came downstairs. She was in her room. 20 minutes later, he commented that Allison looked tired today. I was sitting right next to him on the couch. Allison was still upstairs. I asked him what he meant. He got defensive, said he was talking about earlier at dinner. I'd been at work during dinner. Allison had eaten alone with him. He got up and went to bed early. Monday morning, I found Daniel's phone on the charger while he was in the shower. I wasn't snooping, I swear. I was just plugging mine in next to his. His screen lit up with a text notification from Allison. My heart gave a little lurch. I picked up his phone, opened their message thread. He'd been texting her directly, asking about her day, how her new job was going, whether she needed help moving furniture, making plans to help her pack boxes on Saturday, without ever mentioning it to me. The messages were friendly, nothing overtly inappropriate, but the secrecy bothered me more than the content. Why hadn't he told me he was texting my sister? Why make plans without including me? I took screenshots, sent them to myself, deleted the evidence that I'd done so, and put his phone back exactly where it was. Allison came to me Tuesday after work. She showed me her phone, Daniel's messages. She said she'd been keeping her responses brief and professional, but she was deeply uncomfortable with how often he contacted her. She'd respond with one-word answers or just thumbs-up emojis. He'd send 3 or 4 messages for every one of hers. Then she told me she'd found an apartment, signed the lease that morning. She was moving out in 2 weeks, way earlier than our original 6-week plan. She looked so relieved when she said it. I hugged her. I told her I understood. She said she'd still be in town, we could have lunch every week, but she just needed her own space. She needed to not be the reason my marriage was falling apart. Wednesday night, while Daniel was asleep next to me, I checked our credit card statements. I scrolled through the charges from the past month, found $347 in purchases I didn't recognize. Expensive coffee from the fancy store downtown, the kind Allison mentioned she liked once. New towels for the guest room in the exact color she'd said was pretty. A gift card to her favorite clothing store. Bath products in her preferred scent. All charged to our joint card. All things specifically for her. I took screenshots of everything, added them to a folder on my phone labeled Evidence. I went to sleep with my back to Daniel. Thursday morning, I confronted him at breakfast. I showed him the credit card statements on my phone. Can you explain $300 in purchases for my sister? I asked, my voice flat. He said he was just being a good host, that she was going through a divorce, and he wanted her to feel welcome. I pushed back. Why did you need to buy her expensive gifts when she was only staying a few weeks? He said I was being paranoid and jealous, making something innocent into something ugly. I pointed out that he'd forgotten our anniversary last month. Didn't buy me flowers, didn't make a reservation. Forgot completely until I mentioned it 2 days later. But he remembered Allison's favorite coffee brand after one conversation. He said that wasn't fair. It shows exactly where your priorities are, I shot back. He left for work without finishing his breakfast. I spent the weekend avoiding Daniel. Stayed in the guest room Friday night. Saturday morning, he found me making coffee. We need to talk, he said. He suggested marriage counseling. The words came out fast, like he'd been practicing them. I looked at him, standing there in his wrinkled shirt and messy hair. He probably thought a counselor would take his side, tell me I was being crazy, jealous, making problems out of nothing. I said yes immediately. Daniel looked surprised. I wanted a professional to hear how often he called me by my sister's name. I wanted someone objective to witness what was happening. We sat at the kitchen table, and Daniel found a counselor online, Portia Frost. Good reviews and opening next week. He made the appointment while I watched. Clicked through the forms, entered our information. His hands shook a little when he typed. The appointment confirmation came through on his phone. Tuesday at 4 o'clock. This will help us work through things, Daniel said. I didn't respond. Just took my coffee back to the guest room and closed the door. Tuesday afternoon, I pulled out the notebook. I counted them again. 37 times Daniel had called me Allison in 4 weeks. I dated each incident, noted the context, what we were doing, who else was present. I put the notebook in my purse. Daniel came home from work early, changed into nicer clothes. We drove to Portia's office in silence. The building was downtown near the courthouse. A third-floor office with beige walls and comfortable chairs. Portia greeted us at the door. Mid-50s, gray hair pulled back, a calm, assessing expression. She gestured to the couch and sat across from us in an armchair. "Tell me why you're here," she said gently. Daniel started talking about communication issues, how he'd been struggling lately, how my sister moving and had created some tension. He made it sound so reasonable, like normal marriage problems. Portia turned to me, asked for my perspective. I pulled out the notebook, and I started to read. The first 10 incidents. The dates, the contexts, the pattern. Daniel's face went pale. I kept reading. 15 incidents. 20. All 37 total in 4 weeks. Portia's expression changed. Her eyebrows pulled together. She leaned forward in her chair, then asked Daniel directly, "Is this accurate?" He nodded slowly. I hadn't realized it was that many times. Portia wrote something in her notepad. She asked Daniel very calmly, "Why do you think you keep using Allison's name?" Daniel stumbled through his answer. "Work's been stressful. The names sound similar. I get confused. I've been distracted." Portia put down her pen. "Rebecca and Allison sound nothing alike, Daniel. Different number of syllables, different sounds, no overlap." She paused. "What specifically about work stress would cause you to repeatedly call your wife by her sister's name?" Daniel opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. "I don't know," he finally managed. "I just get mixed up sometimes." Portia asked if he mixed up other people's names. Other family members, coworkers, friends? Daniel shook his head. "Just mine. And Allison's." Portia made another note. The session lasted 50 minutes. She gave us homework. Daniel needed to catch himself every time he used the wrong name. Correct himself immediately. Acknowledge what he'd done. We scheduled another appointment for next week. We drove home in silence again. That night, Daniel barely spoke. Sat on the couch staring at the TV without really watching. I made dinner. We ate separately. Him in the living room, me in the kitchen. Around 10, I went to bed. Daniel came in an hour later, slid under the covers next to me. I pretended to be asleep. He moved closer, put his hand on my shoulder, started kissing my neck. I stayed still, didn't respond. He kept going. His hand moved down my side, and then he whispered it. "Allison." The name came out soft against my ear. I pushed him away hard. Sat up, turned on the lamp. Daniel's face crumpled. He started crying. Actually crying. Tears running down his face. "I don't know what's wrong with me," he sobbed. "I don't understand why I keep doing it." His shoulders shook. I just got out of bed, went back to the guest room, and locked the door behind me. Saturday morning came too fast. Allison's moving day. I'd barely slept. I came downstairs to find Daniel already dressed. He'd taken the day off work. He was putting on his shoes when Allison's car pulled up outside. She'd rented a small truck. Daniel practically ran out the door. I followed slowly, watching him greet her with a huge smile. The first real smile I'd seen from him in days. He grabbed boxes from the guest room, carried them down the stairs 2 at a time, made jokes about how much stuff she'd accumulated. Allison laughed. That easy laugh she'd always had. Daniel lit up every time she did. They worked together, loading the truck. Daniel knew exactly where each box should go, organized everything perfectly, talked about the best route to her new apartment, whether she needed help unpacking. I stood in the doorway, holding one small box, watching my husband show more energy and enthusiasm than he'd shown me in months. More than he'd shown for our anniversary. More than he'd shown for anything involving us. The truck filled up. Daniel closed the back door, told Allison he'd follow her to the new place, help her unload. I said I wasn't coming. Had things to do here. Daniel barely looked at me, just nodded and got in his car. I watched them drive away, standing there in the empty driveway, feeling like a stranger, like someone visiting their own life from the outside. The house felt different with Allison gone. Quieter, yes, but not peaceful. Daniel came home that evening exhausted. He said the apartment was small, but nice. Said Allison seemed happy to have her own space. Then he started, "Do you think the apartment is too small? Can she afford it on her new job salary? Does she have enough furniture? Will she be lonely living alone after her divorce?" He went on for 20 minutes. Every sentence about Allison, how she was doing, what she needed, whether we should check on her more often. I made dinner while he talked, set the table, sat down to eat. Daniel kept going. "Maybe we should invite her over for dinner next week. Make sure she's settling in." That was it. I put down my fork. "Allison is fine, Daniel," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "She's a grown woman who's been married before. She can handle living alone." Daniel looked hurt. Said he was just being concerned. "No," I said, meeting his gaze. "You're obsessed." He denied it. But the next morning, he brought her up again at breakfast. And that afternoon. And before bed. Tuesday night, I woke up to light from the hallway. Checked the clock. 2 o'clock in the morning. I got up and found Daniel on the couch with his phone. The screen brightness lit up his face in the dark. I walked closer. Allison's social media. He was scrolling through her photos, stopping on certain ones, zooming in. "What are you doing, Daniel?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He jumped, nearly dropped the phone. "I was just checking she was okay. Making sure she'd posted recently, so I knew she was safe," he stammered. I pointed out that checking someone's social media at 2 o'clock in the morning wasn't normal concern. That Daniel is obsession. He got defensive, said I was overreacting again, making everything into a problem. But his hands were shaking. He closed the app, went back to bed. I stayed on the couch, staring at the dark ceiling. This behavior was getting scary now. Not just hurtful. Actually scary. Marshall showed up Wednesday afternoon with coffee. Said he'd been worried since the company dinner, wanted to check in. We sat at the kitchen table, and I told him everything. The counseling session, the notebook with 37 incidents, Daniel taking off work for Allison's move, the 2 a.m. social media checking. Marshall listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a minute. Then he said gently, "Rebecca, Daniel might need individual therapy, not just marriage counseling. This level of focus on one person isn't normal. It isn't healthy." He said it reminded him of his brother, who developed an unhealthy attachment to a coworker and needed professional help. I asked what happened with his brother. Marshall said it took months of therapy, but he eventually worked through it, got better. I nodded. Something loosened in my chest. Having someone else say Daniel's behavior wasn't normal helped. It made me feel less crazy. That night, I told Daniel he needed to see a therapist on his own. Not just our marriage counselor. Someone who could help him figure out why he was so focused on my sister. Daniel started to argue. Said he wasn't obsessed. I cut him off. "If you don't make an appointment by Friday, I'm moving out temporarily. I'm going to stay with Marshall until you get help." Daniel's face went white. He asked if I was serious. "Completely serious," I said. "I can't live like this anymore. I can't be in a marriage where my husband is more concerned about my sister than about me. Where he calls me by her name during intimate moments. Where he checks her social media at 2 o'clock in the morning." Daniel sat down hard on the couch, put his head in his hands. Finally he said, "Okay, I'll find a therapist. I'll make an appointment." He looked genuinely scared, like he was just now realizing I might actually leave, that this wasn't something he could smooth over or explain away. Daniel found a therapist Thursday morning, someone Portia recommended. Made an appointment for the following week. Started going twice a week, individual sessions just for him. After a month, Portia asked us both to come to one of her sessions. Said Daniel had made some progress she wanted to discuss with both of us present. We sat in her office again. Same beige walls, same comfortable chairs. Portia asked Daniel to share what he'd been working on. Daniel took a deep breath. He said he'd been comparing me to Allison, constantly. Not just with names, but with everything. How we looked, how we acted, what we were good at. He said he felt guilty about it. Knew it wasn't fair to me. Knew it was damaging our marriage. It was the first time he'd been really honest about the problem. Actually admitted what he was doing instead of making excuses. But when Portia asked why it started, he couldn't explain. He just said he didn't know. Couldn't pinpoint when or why Allison became such a focus. I sat there listening. I felt tired more than anything else. Tired of being second choice in my own marriage. Tired of fighting for my husband's attention. Tired of wondering if this would ever really get better. I wrote out my boundaries on notebook paper that night. 3 rules. No contacting Allison without telling me first. No looking at her social media. Correct himself immediately every time he used the wrong name. Daniel sat across from me at the kitchen table, reading my list. He nodded slowly. Said he could do that. Said he would try harder. The first week, he broke all 3 rules twice. Texted Allison asking if she needed help assembling furniture. Checked her Instagram at lunch. Called me Allison when asking about dinner plans. Then just kept talking like nothing happened. I showed him the list again. Reminded him about the immediate correction part. He apologized. Said it was harder than he thought, breaking 7 years of habits. I pointed out he'd only been obsessed with my sister for 2 months. So what 7-year habit was he talking about? Daniel went quiet. The second week was slightly better. He told me before texting Allison about a package that got delivered to our house by mistake. Caught himself halfway through calling me Allison and corrected it. But I found his phone open to her Facebook profile anyway. When I confronted him, he said he was just making sure she was settling in okay. I asked why he needed to check her photos to know that. He had no answer. Allison texted me 3 weeks after she moved out, asking if I wanted to get lunch. Just us. No Daniel. I met her at a cafe downtown on Saturday. She looked good, less stressed than when she lived with us. We ordered sandwiches and coffee. She started apologizing again before our food even arrived. Said she felt terrible about everything, about Daniel's behavior, about the strain on my marriage. I cut her off. Told her for the 100th time that none of this was her fault. She didn't ask Daniel to obsess over her, didn't encourage his behavior. She was just existing and he made it weird. Allison's eyes got watery. She said she kept thinking if she'd just stayed in a hotel, none of this would have happened. I grabbed her hand across the table. You are my sister, I told her, and I wanted to help you. Daniel's issues are his to fix, not yours to prevent. We talked for 2 hours about her new job, her apartment, her plans to start dating again eventually. It felt normal, like we were just sisters catching up, not people caught in my husband's mess. When we hugged goodbye in the parking lot, it felt right, like we were rebuilding something separate from all the marriage problems. 3 months passed. Daniel was down to calling me Allison once or twice a week instead of multiple times every day. Progress, technically, but still not normal. Still not what a marriage should be. I watched him catch himself mid-sentence, saw the concentration on his face when he said my actual name, like he had to actively remember who I was, who he married. It exhausted me, the constant monitoring, checking if he'd looked at Allison's social media, listening for him to slip up with names, wondering if this was just who we were now. A husband who had to work not to call his wife by her sister's name. A wife who had to police her husband's every word and action. I lay awake some nights, trying to decide if I could live like this forever. If this counted as a marriage worth saving. Daniel was trying. Going to therapy, following most of the boundaries, most of the time. But trying shouldn't be this hard. Saying your wife's name correctly shouldn't require active effort after 7 years together. Portia scheduled an extra session to talk about long-term planning. We sat in her office. Same beige walls, same comfortable chairs that had witnessed months of our problems. She pulled out a folder with papers, a structured plan she'd created, continued therapy for both of us, monthly check-ins about boundaries and progress, honest conversations about expectations. She looked at both of us seriously. Your marriage has permanent damage, she said. Some of that damage might never fully heal. She asked if we understood what that meant. Daniel shifted in his seat. Said he understood. Said he'd keep working on it. I nodded. Said I understood, too. Portia asked how I felt about staying in the marriage, knowing it might never be completely repaired. I thought about it. Really thought. Then I said I was cautiously hopeful but realistic. I said I knew some broken trust couldn't be completely fixed, but I was okay taking things one day at a time, keeping my options open, not committing to forever when forever felt impossible to promise. Daniel reached for my hand. I let him take it, but I didn't squeeze back. Honestly, going through all of this, it's been a lot. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to fight so hard for recognition in your own relationship? Tell me what you think in the comments. I really want to know.